in the heart of Australia, far from the noise of the cities. There is a place that looks peaceful from the outside, but at night, Alice Springs can feel like a town holding its breath. This is not just a story about one incident. It is a story about fear, isolation, and a community that has seen too much. Because sometimes, the most terrifying places are the ones that feel the most remote. People outside the Northern Territory often imagine the outback as quiet, open, and harmless, but for many locals, the silence after dark is not peaceful at all. It feels dangerous. When the streets go empty, every sound becomes louder, and every shadow starts to look like a threat. This story sits inside a much bigger reality: poverty, disadvantage, violence, and trauma that have shaped life in parts of Central Australia for generations. And when a community is already under pressure, every new tragedy cuts deeper. That is what makes the story so haunting. It is not isolated. It is part of a pattern. To understand what happened, you have to understand the setting. Alice Springs is isolated, stretched between long distances, heat, and hardship. That isolation can create beauty, but it can also create fear. Because when something goes wrong, help can feel very far away. In recent times, Alice Springs has again been in the headlines for violent crime, community unrest, and urgent calls for action. Life in the town has been shaped by fear as much as by routine. And once a place develops that reputation, every fresh tragedy feels even more alarming. In April 2026, a 5-year-old girl disappeared from a home in Alice Springs, and a desperate search began almost immediately. For days, police, family members, and community volunteers searched the area, hoping for a miracle. But in the end, the story turned into a tragedy that shocked the whole country. Searches like this expose the worst kind of fear, the kind that spreads through a community when a child is missing and nobody knows where to start. Every hour matters, every lead matters, and every passing minute makes the silence feel heavier. As the search went on, the whole town seemed to wait for news it did not want to hear. For the family, the uncertainty would have been unbearable. For the community, it was another reminder that some losses never make sense, and some wounds never really close. Police later said they believed a 47-year-old man, Jefferson Lewis, was involved in the child's abduction and death. According to the reports, he was charged after the body was found, turning the case into one of the most disturbing crimes Alice Springs had seen in years. What makes this case so horrifying is not just what happened, but where it happened. Alice Springs is a place where people already live with pressure, instability, and grief far too often. This tragedy did not come out of nowhere. It landed in a town already carrying too much. After the arrest, the case moved from a missing person search into a major criminal investigation. Police began assembling a huge brief of evidence, while the courts prepared for a case that had already gripped the entire territory. By late July, prosecutors said the evidence against the accused was very substantial. The size of the investigation shows how seriously the case was being treated. Witness statements, body-worn footage, drone video, CCTV, interview material, and forensic testing all became part of the picture. This was no longer just a local tragedy, it was a case being examined from every possible angle. In the days that followed, the town did what grieving towns do. It gathered, it mourned, and it tried to make sense of the unthinkable. People wore pink in memory of the little girl, and the community turned its pain into a public act of remembrance. But the grief did not stay quiet. The arrest triggered unrest across Alice Springs, with violent scenes, damaged police vehicles, and a community pushed even closer to the edge. It was as if one tragedy had cracked open everything that was already broken. In the end, this story is not only about a crime. It is about a child whose life was cut short, a town left shattered, and a place that Australia can no longer afford to look at and ignore. Alice Springs became the center of a national conversation not just about violence, but about responsibility, safety, and what happens when warning signs are left along. As the town mourned, tributes kept growing. Candles, flowers, and handwritten messages became a public sign of heartbreak. For many people, this was no longer just breaking news, it was a community in deep grief. In the days after the tragedy, the town camp became a place of mourning and cultural respect. Leaders asked the public to understand that this was sorry business, a time that belongs to family, community, and cultural grieving. People from across the town came together in pink to honor the little girl's favorite color and to show solidarity with her family. It was one of the rare moments when the town's pain was visible in a shared and human way. But grief in Alice Springs was quickly joined by anger, fear, and frustration. The violence that followed the arrest showed how fragile the situation had become. The town was mourning, but it was also under pressure. This case also forced a harder conversation about child protection, town camp conditions, and whether enough had been done to stop another tragedy before it happened. People in Alice Springs were not just asking who was responsible, they were asking how so many warnings could exist at once and still lead to the same outcome. By morning, the town looked the same as it always had: red earth, wide skies, and endless distance. But for the people living there, nothing felt the same anymore. That is the cruelest part of stories like this. The world keeps turning, even when a family's world has stopped. The memorials were not just symbols of grief. They were proof that people were trying to hold onto dignity in the middle of heartbreak. Every candle, every ribbon, every message said the same thing: she mattered. The legal process will continue, and the courts will do what courts do. But no verdict can return what was lost. No sentence can erase the fear that spread through the town. Alice Springs is more than a headline. It is a place full of families, history, culture, pain, and resilience. And this story should not end as just another dark news cycle. It should be remembered as a warning that ignoring crisis always comes at a cost. And somewhere in that silence, the town is still left asking the same question: how many more tragedies must happen before change finally becomes real? Because in Alice Springs, the fear did not begin with this story, but this story made it impossible to ignore. If this story stays with you, it should, because some places do not need more shock. They need honesty, action, and memory.